Welcome to Blue Dream Health Collective, where we talk about real health as well as chronic illness, self-care, mental health, and other interesting and educational topics. I'm the host, Misty Blue, a biomedical science major and a chronic illness warrior. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you love this episode. Bob is a recipient of a mechanical aortic heart valve and ascending aorta from 2016, and he's currently living life on blood thinners. The question that loomed over his head was whether or not he could still be active while taking anticoagulants. Bob is a climber and an English teacher who lives in Denver, Colorado. I'm super excited to meet Bob for real this time, just not on Instagram, and to pick his brain while sharing his story. So Bob, please say hello and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, my name is Bob. I live in Denver, Colorado, and I am a teacher and I rock climb as much as possible. And I also received a mechanical heart valve in 2016 to repair a stenosis of my aorta.
Wow. I love Denver. It's so pretty. I've been twice and it's beautiful. So that is amazing that you live in such a beautiful place. And I imagine that's probably why you want to take advantage and rock climb all the time. That is so cool.
Right. And that's why I moved here. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause you are from Pennsylvania.
Originally.
I wanted to talk about the surgical procedure. You're very active and you've had this dark cloud basically following you since birth, that you would need this surgery at some point. So what was your official diagnosis that would require the surgery in the first place?
Right. So I was born with aortic stenosis, and there was a pretty heavy narrowing of the aorta when I was born. And basically when I was within 2 weeks old, I don't know exactly how many days old I was, but my parents were kind of given this breakdown of like, what signs are they looking for me to have to go in and speak with a cardiologist, or for them to go in and speak with a cardiologist. So they were looking for things like my fingers to turn blue or lips to turn blue or things like that. So at about 2 weeks old, I started having those symptoms, like my skin was blue. I wasn't getting good circulation. So they had to take me down to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and they did a balloon angioplasty there where they went in and opened up that aortic valve just enough. And they didn't know how long it would last and how long it would be until surgery. But at that point, they were like, okay, this stenosis is severe enough that it needs correction, and eventually I'll need that valve replaced. So
Wow.
I kind of went with that diagnosis for a few years, or until I was 26. And at that point, my cardiologist was like, okay, it's time to get this thing replaced. But until then, every year, it was just a yearly checkup, and we'd go in and look at it again, measure the valve, and then, decide that it was okay to keep going.
So when it was time, were you feeling any specific symptoms? Could you tell it was time? And what was that like?
Yeah, it was a very specific incident, actually, because I was very active. Even though I had a diagnosis of aortic stenosis, I didn't have too much restriction. I was told that I should not do anaerobic exercises. So things that were really stressful, like lifting heavy weights or something like that. So I was cleared for aerobic exercise. But one day I had a backpack on. I couldn't find a climbing partner for a day. So I put on a backpack and I was running up to the Flatirons outside of Boulder, Colorado. And I was running up the trail, and I was going to go climb a little bit by myself. And when I started getting out of breath, which is abnormal in general for running. So I started getting out of breath, and I was trying to re-catch my breath. I couldn't, and I was sitting there for like 5 minutes and I was still huffing. I'm like, oh man, this is weird that I cannot catch my breath right now. So after that, I called my cardiologist, and I spoke with the cardiologist nurse, and he said it was time to just come for an unscheduled appointment. So I showed up, and we kind of looked at the valve, looked at the pressure inside the heart versus the out of the heart. So basically, I measure how much pressure producing, and there had been that pressure since the year before. So my heart was working twice as hard to produce the same amount of output. So at that point, I think that was in like April, and my surgeon or my cardiac doctor said that it was time to start talking about surgery right then.
Wow. So were you pretty shocked to hear that?
Yeah, I didn't know how to handle it really, actually, because I had been going to the cardiologist for my entire life, and every year was the same conversation where I would go in, they look at my echocardiogram or my EKG, and they just say, okay, you're good to go. We'll see you next year.
See you next year.
And then, yeah, bye. And then, so you get kind of like reinforced in that. You're like, oh yeah, I'm going to see a cardiologist. They're going to tell me I'm fine, and then I'll see you next year. And then maybe like I'm just really out of shape, and that's why I was out of breath or something like that. For him to come in and say like, no, you need surgery. It was kind of like more like a reality check again, to be like, oh yeah, I have a heart condition. It is going to need to get fixed. I just kind of kept being told to push it off, and I forgot that it was real almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's
So
almost like you get in denial.
Right. Exactly. So it was scary when he said that. And then at first, but then you just start looking at like, okay, how are we going to do this? What do we need to do? And you get in that process of like planning for it and getting ready for it. So that kind of takes over, I think.
Yeah. So I know you're originally from Pennsylvania, and you moved to be in the mountains in 2013. And so only just 3 years later, you end up having to have this serious surgery, and you're, like a hardcore mountain climbing adventure dude. So tell me about how you coped with knowing that you required this major surgery, which was going to possibly impact your passion for adventure.
Yeah. Okay. I would say most of my adventures though are not very hardcore. Like they're usually me walking up.
For most people, they are.
Yeah.
For someone with heart issues, they sure are.
Yeah. So I think I was actually pretty lucky in how I coped with knowing this. So I basically my entire life I've known that I was going to need surgery, even though I was saying like I kind of kept pushing it off and pushing it off. But I actually think that made me kind of lucky, because what it did, like I started rock climbing and I started traveling a little bit, and then it kind of, with this looming in the background, it became more urgent to like do the things that I want to do. So it became more important to move to Colorado and to climb as much as I could and to get good at it. And so I feel like I was kind of lucky, because a lot of people just like push off doing the things that they want to do for like a later date, because it's easy to be like, oh, I'll do this. I'll move to Colorado when I have this much money or when this happens. And you set up all these like parameters of when you'll move. But for me, I was like, I have surgery coming up. At some point, it's going to get real. I have to move now, and I have to like go do these things now. Because I thought at the time that I would not be able to be active. And I was wrong about that, but it was just because I didn't know. And so I was like, okay, I have maybe 3 or 4 more active years of my life. So I need to do this as soon as possible. So the big thing is like, how did I cope with it? It was easy to make decisions to do things that I want to do as soon as possible and not put them off, basically. And the really cool thing is that I still kind of have that same mentality where I put a lot of emphasis on doing like the things that I want to do. So altogether, I would say that it was like a positive experience.
That's awesome. I mean, I can kind of relate, because I feel like I do the same thing, like knowing, you have this upcoming surgery, you're like, okay, you just want to have all the fun you can have just in case or whatever. It's like, um, I mean, I guess that is the fortunate thing about kind of knowing that what's ahead versus just having this like surprise. Even though when it is that day and they say like for you, like, okay, it's time, you're still a little bit surprised, but um, so I wanted to, I went on to mayoclinic.org. So for anyone who is not familiar with heart valve surgery, it's a procedure to treat heart valve disease. So heart valve disease can involve at least one of the four heart valves not working properly. And when your heart valves don't work properly, the blood flow doesn't go in the correct direction in your heart. So for some people, it doesn't. For stenosis is narrowing. And then like mine is the opposite. I have the leaky valve. So mine actually backflows into the heart. And so when you go in to do surgery, typically it depends on where the valve is located. So if someone has an issue with the mitral valve, they can sometimes go in on the side through the rib and make it a little less invasive. And I know that you're in the zipper club. So that
Mm-hmm.
tells me that you had open heart surgery, which, so for those listening, they basically saw through your sternum, open up your chest. It's so painful.
Yeah.
And they put you on like the heart lung machine. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
major serious surgery, and it requires a lot of um, recovery time. So speaking of recovery time, I know like when I had my open heart surgery, it was in 2011. I lost a lot of my upper body strength because I wasn't able to fully do the physical therapy like I should have because of insurance issues. And I felt super defeated. So I want to hear about your story and how, how you were able to basically, like, I want to know your recovery time and how you're able to like get back to normal. Like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so the first, I agree. Like the having the sternum open, um, I think is the hardest part of recovery, because you do lose your muscle mass. And then you do also have this fear of like maybe a shifting in this, because they rejoin it by basically using a wire to like pull that all back together. So you fear that there's going to be like maybe a shifting in there or something like that. Um, and so the first thing I did, like for the first 5 weeks after surgery, my cardiologist told me that I was not allowed to really do much of anything. And that was actually really nice because when there's a like, specific timeline, and when there's like a specific, like you cannot do activity right now, it's easy. When it's kind of gray area, it's like, oh, we'll do it. So however you feel it, it's easy to push it. So for the first 5 weeks though, I couldn't, do anything with my arms. So no driving, no like pushing myself out of bed or like holding myself up if I like slip in the shower or anything like that. So it's really important to like, I would just follow my doctor's parameters. I did as much as I could to not use my arms. But then getting back into it at 5 weeks, he said, okay, at this point, you cannot break your sternum. It's your bones have fused together and you're good to go, just like with any broken bone. Luckily, this is, of course, like a broken bone that was done by a surgeon, so it heals really nicely.
But they keep the wire in. You still have your wire, right?
I do. Yeah. So I have
Yeah.
like actually a couple of bumps on my scar that are sticking out because there's a wire in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, so they leave that in. And at 5 weeks, though, my cardiologist, and actually it was my cardiac surgeon, he said, yeah, at this point, you're good to go. And I thought the checkup was going to be him doing a bunch of tests on me and things like that. But he just was basically like, hey, do you have any symptoms? Whatever. He took me off of the blood pressure medicine I was on. That was making me really, really tired too. So at 5 weeks, I was off my blood pressure medicine and I knew I couldn't break my sternum. And he said at that point, I could start activity and I could do it till discomfort, and that I shouldn't push it, but I should start kind of building up a little bit. So what I basically started to do was just kind of like show up at the gym again. Well, and actually maybe step back before that. After surgery, when I was on the blood pressure medicine and the first 5 weeks, really my big adventures, I would like go to the end of the block and then
Oh
like
yeah.
turn around and make it all the way back home. And then like the next day I'd be like, okay, I think I can cross the street today. And like, cause crossing the street's scary because if a car comes and you can't move quickly, like, so I would be like, okay, today I'm going to cross the street. So then I would like cross the street and be like, okay, and I would go back home. So I would kind of keep adding on to what I could do every day. And it's simple activities like that.
It's
And a
so
lot of it was
true
just
though.
walking.
Yeah, it's like the going to the mailbox or whatever is like, it's like such a huge thing whenever you have open heart surgery and you're trying to recover. That's like always, that's like the first like main goal, like go to the end of the driveway.
Right. And it's so scary because everything is a little bit scary. Like walking
Yeah.
up the stairs is a little bit scary because you could fall and you haven't ever in your entire life, but it could happen. And so it's scary. And then I also, for example, like one day I was cooking and I went to get a knife out of the drawer and I just like leaned and I like pulled the drawer out and the whole drawer came out in my hand and I'm like holding this thing. I'm like, oh no, like I'm going to injure my chest. So there were a lot of things where everything just seems scary at first because you have all those restrictions, but kind of just starting to build up and be like, okay, now I can cook meal, like I can use a knife, I can do that, I can now like walk to the end of the block, and just kind of starting to accumulate the things that you're able to do again was really nice.
Yeah.
um,
So how were you able to move past like the caution and fear and into the ability to live an active life again and have that norm?
yeah, I think that the big thing is like, I almost think of it like a pyramid. Like you kind of start to gather all these pretty simple experiences and then you go a little bit more challenging and you gather a bunch of those and you go a little bit more challenging and you kind of build your way up. So one example is like I would show up at the gym and I go to a climbing gym in Denver, and I would like show up at the gym and then just like I would use the pull-up machine, but they have a pull-up machine that basically has a counterweight on it. So I think at that time I weighed like around 175 pounds. So I could put a counterweight on my feet or basically stand on this thing that was maybe 165 pounds. So I was doing a pull-up, but really it was only a 10-pound pull-up. But I was going through that
Oh,
motion of like moving my muscles, of like moving my chest and making sure everything felt good. So I think the big thing was just building up. Then I would then be like, okay, I did with 165 pounds off. Now tomorrow, maybe I'm going to try 160. And I would kind of just build up. And I think that same mentality went into climbing too, where I would be like, okay, first I'm going to just, I remember one weekend I went climbing with my friends and I did not bring any of my gear. I just walked to the crag, to the rock wall, and I hung out there all day. And, and then I walked back home and I was like, okay, I can get there and I can like start from there. And then I would be like, okay, I'm going to try this really easy thing with the ability to come down really quickly. And if I wanted to, and I would kind of do that and slowly just add on like, okay, I've done that now a bunch of times. Now I can do one thing harder. Maybe I'll start to do a more challenging climb, and same thing, just kind of adding on to those.
that's perfect because I feel like a lot of people, they go straight to that big goal. Like I want to climb a mountain or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels defeating and so hard and so far away. So making those small little goals in between are more realistic that leads you to that main goal.
Right. If
So
you get
I
out of
love that.
surgery and you're like, I want to run a marathon this year, and you're like, oh no, I wasn't able to run my marathon, it feels disappointing. But if you get out of surgery and you kind of just play it as like, I'm going to not run a marathon, but I'm going to like make sure that when I feel comfortable with an activity, I increase the difficulty, and then I feel comfortable there and I increase the difficulty again. And taking that mentality is a lot easier, I think, than setting a big goal of like, I'm going to run a marathon the same year I get a surgery or something like that.
So let's talk about mental and physical preparation for surgery and recoveries.
Mhm.
What kind of tips do you have, or you want to share your story for anyone who may, whether it's heart surgery or some other major surgery, like how to prepare mentally for that?
Yeah, I think the mental preparation is, for me, was a little bit harder than the physical preparation. So for the mental aspect of things, one thing I did was kind of set up the surgery on my own terms, which I could do with my condition. It was when I talked to my cardiologist in April, he said, we need to get this done in the next couple of months. And I went to see the cardiac surgeon and he said, let's do it next week. And he wanted to get it done
Oh,
like before May. And I was like, whoa, I'm not ready for surgery next week.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what you do to get ready for surgery. I don't even know that yet, but I haven't done it. So I have to go back and like, I need some time. So he's like, oh yeah, you have time, whatever you want to do. So I even though he gave me that, like, you have to get it done as soon as possible, there was also some wiggle room. So basically I pushed off my surgery for about a month. I saw the cardiac surgeon in beginning of May, I think. And then I had my surgery on June 1st. So I think a big part of the mental aspect of things was to kind of set it up on my own terms, give myself a little bit of time. And in that time, I like went and saw like all my friends, and like I knew I just would spend the entire summer recovering. And also there's just like uncertainties about like what is going to be my ability level after surgery. I don't know. So what I did was I like went climbing with all of my friends. My family came from Philadelphia to visit for a little while, so it gave me time to like see everybody, and I had like a party
Oh, I love
just to
it.
like, see all my friends and my coworkers. And it was really good to just see everyone and like know that you have like a little bit of a support system. And that was really, really nice. And then the other part of so basically setting it up so that you can like be prepared and that you can have your support system in place was really nice. The other mental part was kind of being able to know that when I came home from surgery, or like, I guess kind of visualizing the whole thing. So visualizing like, okay, I'm going to wake up kind of disoriented, maybe with the breathing tube, and I'm going to be in a medical room, and like just visualizing that being like, okay, I know that's going to be weird. I'm going to be prepared. So when you do wake up in that situation, it's not like after something traumatic happens where it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting to wake up in a hospital with a breathing tube. I've kind of like visualized it a little bit. And I was like, okay, this is going to happen. When it happens, everything's fine. There's doctors there. And just kind of reminding myself that that was okay. And that when I woke up, this is what the scene could look like, and just kind of visualizing it. Luckily, I had a couple other surgeries, like I had 2 ACL surgeries and things like that. So I kind of was used to what it is like to wake up after general anesthesia. But yeah, just kind of visualizing it too. So when it happens, you're mentally ready to go. And then the last part of that mental aspect too is I set up my house before, and I'm renting from a coworker, but I set up my room on the first floor. So I knew when I came, because my room is in the basement, and I didn't want to go up and down the stairs every
Oh
day.
no, that would be hard.
Right. I also didn't want, if someone came to visit me, I didn't want them to have to go to the basement. I also wanted access to the bathroom and the kitchen a lot easier, so I didn't have to go up and downstairs all the time. So the other part of the mental aspect was just preparing like a space to heal, kind of. And that space had like big open windows in it, and I could like see outside. Even if I couldn't go outside all the time, I could see outside. And just, yeah, getting myself like ready to know that when I came home from surgery, I was like set up and I could, have an easy transition back to a normal life.
Yeah, because you're basically setting yourself up for this long unpaid vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, like, so for me personally, having I think it was like a lazy boy, like a recliner chair was amazing. And I highly, highly recommend it. Did you have anything special like that to help you recover? Cause I had heard about it. Actually, I might ask you. So back when I had it, there was something called, I think it's called open heart surgery or valvesurgeries.com or something like that. I'll have to look. And it was almost like a Facebook for people that were having a valve surgery. And
Really?
yeah, so, okay. So well, that was how I found my surgeon and everything, but it was, for me personally, this was before like the Facebook groups days. So it was amazing to kind of have that space where I connected with other people that were going through the same thing and of all ages too. And they were from all over. So, I'm just curious, like, did you have any type of support or any special tool that helped you through recovery?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. So I said for most of my life, I did not know anybody that had aortic stenosis. and I knew 0 people who had a heart surgery. And so
Wow.
I was going into it and I was like, I know the medical part of it. I know like what's going to happen, what they're replacing. I know the words to say and, all that stuff, but I'd never met anyone who had actually been through the process. And luckily, at some point between, and so it was just in that little bit of a month window at that time between when my my cardiologist said that I would need surgery and when I actually got surgery, I met a guy named Jack who had the same exact surgery on his aortic stenosis. He had the valve replaced, and luckily, like through friends, I just met him, and I was like, it was so nice to sit with him and just to be like, oh, you're like my age, you've had heart surgery, and you're fine. And just to see that. So I didn't really have a support group set up with people. I did have like, family and friends and all that stuff, but I did not have anyone who had been through it before. And that's actually one of the reasons that promoted me like starting a blog and kind of like doing the Instagram thing a little bit, because I realized that a lot of people go into surgery without that support system. And I feel like that is so important to the mental aspect of things.
Absolutely. I mean, even if you have family and friends that are there for you, it's amazing and great, but they also don't necessarily understand how you feel and like your perspective. So meeting other people who are going through like a similar thing, it really helps. So whether it's another website or social media or other people's blogs, I definitely think that that's something that can also help with the process mentally. Okay. And then the next question was, so like I said, for me, the lazy boy, because when you're laying on a flat bed and you have to raise up with a broken sternum, it is hard. So tell me like what kind of physical things that, you use to help you through your healing process.
Yeah, so this is that part of like I didn't know anyone who had surgery, and I didn't know the doctors didn't tell you what you need to do to set up your house or like what kind of things you'll need to recover. They're worried about the surgery and all that stuff. So I have 2 simple things maybe. One thing that really helped me was I have hardwood floors in the house. So if you have like the same like hardwood floors, I was just so afraid of slipping down the stairs. So I would always wear those hospital socks with the little rubber grips on the bottom. And that helped me just like a little extra
Peace of
support to be like,
mind.
yeah, and that's tiny. It sounds so small. But it was really, really important. And then for the sternum break, the big thing is that when you move, it's actually really nice to have pressure on your sternum when you're moving. So yeah, getting out of bed, I didn't know that was going to be a thing until the nurses told me after surgery. But I would say that anyone who is getting prepared for surgery, like mentally and physically, like having core strength is kind of important, because you are going to have to get out of bed without being able to push off the bed. So just knowing that, then the big thing that I had was a pillow, and it was a pillow this is a normal thing. Everyone who has a heart surgery, I think that I've met now since then, has had some type of pillow.
Oh yeah.
And the hospital gives you one. And it was actually funny. My grandma sent me one as well. She had like
Aw.
sewn it and made this little like pillow with a heart on it. So yeah, having something to push against your chest when you're sitting up is really important. The other thing I would even say too is to practice that, maybe, because I don't have a lazy boy. I was in my bed recovering most of the time. A lazy boy would be nice. The other thing though, you can't lift that arm if you have like
Oh
an
yeah.
arm on that thing, so you have to get someone to help you with that. You might be stuck in your lazy boy
I
if
don't
not.
remember. Yeah, I don't remember how
Yeah.
that worked.
But so I would even suggest too, in addition to having that pillow, is just to practice and actually, like before surgery, get good at like laying completely prone and then sitting up and spinning your legs over and standing up out of bed, and just maybe getting that muscle memory before you do surgery. Because when you are taking pain medicine and when you are recovering from the mental aspect of being on anesthesia or having general anesthesia for many hours, it's going to be nice that you already know how to do that thing. And when you go to the hospital, the nurses will help you and they will walk you through it and show you how to do it. But it's just good to have the core muscle, the pillow, and already that muscle memory kind of built in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it'll help with healing to have that. I feel like a lot of times, people get deconditioned maybe because they don't feel well, which is understandable. But even if you can just like in bed, try to do some leg stuff or some arm
Mm-hmm.
stuff or like, with the core, I think that's so smart. And then I had a question too about just like the recovery time. How was that trying to find someone to help you? Because I know for me, they said you have to have someone for the first 2 weeks you're home, like 100, like 24/7 supervision. And that was really difficult for me at the time to find. How did that work out for you?
Well, luckily, I am a teacher. So I'm surrounded by a couple other teachers, and I got surgery on June 1st. So I had the summer
Oh,
off.
perfect.
So I had people around me, and it was pretty easy in that situation to get prepared for that, with just having people around, I guess, was a big thing. And then, yeah, I'm sorry, what was the second part of that?
Oh, just, if you had somebody that was there for you for those first 2 weeks and like helping with meals and, if that process was difficult to find
Yeah,
that.
I think that was that's another part of that, like, preparation for surgeries. Maybe you even like prepare, like, what are you going to be able to eat after surgery, and getting those
Mhm.
meals like ready to go grocery shopping before
Freeze some
surgery,
meals.
freeze some stuff. Don't wake up from surgery and be like, oh, I have to go grocery shopping today. Like,
Yeah.
getting yourself set up for those type of things is really nice. And then I did, it was really interesting too, is I started attending this cardiac recovery group for all these people who had cardiac surgery. And I was excited because I was like, oh, first of all, I'm going to get out of the house today, which was a big thing. Because I was like, this was the first time I'd been out of the house in surgery. And I was like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to like meet other people my age, and we're going to all work out. And like, we're going to have, an EKG going all the time so we can see like how our, whatever. I walked in and it was like a bunch of 80 to 90-year-old guys with like 2-pound weights, and they're just lifting them and putting them down. I was like, oh no, I'm in the wrong place. But this is exactly what, so having that worked really well. I continued to go to that cardiac recovery group, and it was nice because I could get on a bicycle and start pedaling and have a nurse monitoring an EKG while I was doing that. So it's part of that, like, building up your experiences and getting a bunch of, easy experiences and then increasing them. It was nice to do that physical activity with a nurse around too, as part of that support group, so they can watch you and see how you recover, and make sure you're not going to like pass out or that there's
Yeah.
any arrhythmias or anything like that.
So are you going to require more surgeries? I know that, you have to get your valve replaced, because they don't last forever. Tell me about how that works out for you, as far as like what the future looks like.
Right. So I've had two kind of contradicting pieces of information here, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. But when I first got my aortic valve, I talked to my cardiologist, and the cardiologist said that I would be able to basically live the rest of my life with this one mechanical valve.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, it's awesome. Let's do the mechanical valve. So I did a little bit of shopping, and I like, it's weird shopping for a heart valve, but I like kind of like looked around. I ended up going with the Onyx valve, which is it's been amazing. And even looking at that, the cardiac surgeon said, sure, let's get that valve. I'll put that in. This was the first time he'd actually put that valve in, but he's like, this valve it should last forever.
Wow.
And that's amazing. That's really cool. But then if you look at most valve websites, and if you look at information on valves, they say that they last 20 or more years. And like, I don't know what 20 or more means yet, because that could last forever, like the cardiologist said. It could also last 20 years. So ideally, I'm 32 right now. So ideally, I mean, I won't need another surgery. But if I do, basically it would be when I'm hopefully over 50 years old. And then I would basically just have one more mechanical valve. And the other thing too, it's hard to say because maybe there's like some technology that develops that like they last 50 years instead of 20 years. Maybe they have that in the next couple of years. And so it's hard to say right now, but anywhere from 20 years to forever is how long I've been told.
Yeah.
So I don't know the answer to if I'll need another surgery yet. But right now I'm healthy though.
Awesome. So what is it? What does your follow-ups look like? Do you follow up every year, every other year?
Mm-hmm. So every year I go around March, I go and see either my cardiologist or the cardiologist's nurse. Um, and basically, one year I'll go and just see the nurse, go over my symptoms, go over my anticoagulants and like all that's in my medicine. And that's it. And then the next year I'll go see my cardiologist, and I'll get an echocardiogram before, and we'll go over the functioning of the heart. And then so we're kind of switching back and forth right now every other year.
Awesome. So, what is life like on blood thinners?
Yeah, this was a tough one because the big thing when you get a mechanical valve is it lasts a lot longer. So everyone would get a mechanical valve if that was the only thing. But you also need to be on anticoagulants because your body starts to kind of try to clot. So that's the big thing is that, yeah. But anyway, life on blood thinners or anticoagulants is a lot easier than I thought it would be and a lot less scary than I thought it would be. Because I at first was like, oh, if you're on blood thinners, you cannot rock climb. You cannot do all this stuff. I even heard people saying before surgery that you can't walk around outside without shoes on because you might
Wow.
get a cut. Or I don't know if this was an excuse to not do dishes, but I heard people saying too, like, oh, you shouldn't really be doing dishes because if you like reach into soapy water and there's a knife in there, you could get cut and you could whatever. And everyone like lives
I'll
this like
take that.
very, yeah, that might work. You could say that. But yeah, I would say a lot of people kind of set up like all these restrictions and they're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this or this or this. My experience though has been a lot different than what I thought it was. So I was really nervous about skin level bleeds where I would like be out climbing. And basically my hands are cut up for most of the year because I'm climbing. I'm using them on like sharp rocks. And I thought that I wouldn't be able to do this anymore because I figured if you get a cut on your hand or finger that it would be bad. But basically my INR, which is your international normalization ratio, basically my INR is about 2 right now. So I will bleed about twice the normal amount. Everyone's usual INR, if you're have a normal a normal, like no medical stuff, no medicine that you're taking, your INR is usually 1. So my INR is 2, which basically means that I would clot in about twice the amount of time of a normal cut. So with that, I was like, oh, I can't climb. I can't do all this stuff with my hands. I can't use a saw. I can't do whatever. But really, none of that's true. For me, at least. I climb all the time. I get little cuts on my skin and I'm fine. I sometimes put pressure on them. I really have never bled out of control.
What about like a bad fall and getting a bruise?
I get bruises all the time.
Yeah.
And I get, even right now, like I went rock climbing and I smashed my shin on the wall a couple of, maybe 2 weeks ago. And then I went skiing for a couple of days in a row and my ski boots, like my shin was like in my ski boot. And it's like right now I have like this big swollen spot on my shin, but it's not bad. It's like, it's a bruise. You still like need to get hit for, in my case, at least, like I would need to like hit something or bump into something for a bruise to happen. So it's not like you're just, well, at least in my case, I'm not going to just start randomly bruising. I do need to like bash my shin on something. But there are more bruises. The big thing though that I'm worried about is head trauma, because I do rock climb a lot and I ski and I ride my bike. I basically have like an assortment of helmets, because there's a specific rock climbing helmet for top impacts, and there's a specific biking helmet and whatever. So one thing I always do is I always wear a helmet. Even if like none of my friends at the climbing area are wearing a helmet, I always have one on, because I'm worried that if something hits me in the head, or there's a possibility when you're climbing that when you fall, the rope will catch you and flip you. And if I hit my head, I'm always worried about those type of bleeds, because on anticoagulants, to stop that bleed would be a little bit more challenging. But the skin stuff is not as important as I thought it would be.
Yeah. And then what about, because I had read in the past, like doing research, that if you're on blood thinners, you can't have like a lot of greens. There's a lot of things you have to cut out of your life. So I was curious about that, because well, at the moment I've been slacking, but I try to eat very healthy and eat like a lot of greens. And I'm curious, like, did you have to cut all of that out, or how does that work?
I love this question, because I would say right now, in general, I'm a vegetarian. I think I've eaten meat like 4 times in the last year, on like special occasions. But anyway, so I was like, oh, vegetables, you have to cut those out. I'm like, well, what am I going to eat? And so I think that this is one of the biggest misconceptions with anticoagulants, is that you have to cut out the greens. And then the second thing is that you cannot drink alcohol. And those were the 2 things I was told going into surgery by a couple different people, not a doctor. So people told me, like, that were on because I think a lot of people have been on anticoagulants at least a little bit in their life, like after surgery or something. So I was talking to a couple people, and they basically said no greens, no vitamin K, which is the big thing, because it's a clotting, it clots. So basically it counteracts your Coumadin or whatever you're on. But what I found out, the truth or like what my doctor explained to me, and what I now have basically like a anticoagulant therapist, where she basically like looks at my levels and things like that. What they've both told me is that I should have a consistent diet, and that's it. And if my diet is consistent, they will take my warfarin level and they'll adjust it to meet my diet. So if I want to eat 4 bags of spinach a day, I might be able to, but I have to have a medicine level that meets that. So really the big thing is to not be like, never ever eat a green thing in your entire life and then switch over, and now all you're doing is eating like kale chips every day or something like that. So you want to make sure that your diet is consistent, and then that you have medicine that meets where your levels are. And the same thing with alcohol. You can't like never drink ever and then like drink 5 beers in the night. You shouldn't do that, because that's going to raise your INR up a lot, because the alcohol kind of binds to the same thing that the INR or that your warfarin does, and it takes over. So basically it raises your INR. So the other thing is just consistency with alcohol too. So if you want to have like a beer a week, that's awesome. If you want to have like 2 beers a day, you can, but you need to make sure that your medicine matches where your levels are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I didn't even think about that. So like if someone were to just like go all out and decide they wanted to do a lot of shots and stuff, and they're on a thinner, like that would probably be a scary night, or they'd have to really not fall or something, right? Or how does that work?
Well, you just shouldn't do it, because unless that's what you do every single night and your medicine is there to match it. But I don't know about that. But yeah, so if you fall, you would bruise more. If you get cut, you would bleed more. The other thing though is if you had like an ulcer in your stomach and that breaks, then you would bleed more internally. Basically, like your INR can go way up from drinking a lot of alcohol.
Yeah.
So that would be a bad idea. So
don't do that.
Yeah.
So I love to travel. I have major wanderlust. So I want to know, like, just a fun question, like your favorite adventure that you've done. And then the second question is your favorite place that you've ever been to or seen.
Okay. My favorite adventure has been climbing El Cap last year. So in October 2019, I climbed.
Okay. Where's that for those who aren't familiar?
Yeah. So it's a 3,000 or 3,200 foot tall granite wall. It's vertical
Whoa.
in Yosemite Valley. So if you think about that, it's over a half-mile tall, which is
Wow.
outrageous. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life,
And
and
it's granite? I'm gonna
it's
have to look
granite.
that up.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And everyone like there's a couple of videos that have been released recently that focus on that mountain. But anyway, so it's this like monolith. It's this wall that in Yosemite Valley. So it's really easy to get to.
Wow.
You can from the road to the base of the wall is like a 5-minute walk, and it's gigantic. You can see it from all over. So I think in 2016 I first went to maybe it was 2015. I first went to Yosemite and I saw this wall and I was like, oh my goodness, this is way bigger than I thought. And I had always wanted to climb it. And I kind of, at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And in 2019, I finally, like, I had a good team of climbing, like two friends that were really great climbing partners. And we had the experience and the fitness, and we were like, okay, let's go give this a shot. So we climbed the nose route, which is 3,200 feet tall, and took us 3 days. So we basically
Whoa.
like, well, the first day we like climbed, and everyone does it basically the same way if you do it in that style. But we climbed and like we haul up all of our gear and water and food, and then the second day we like, and then we lowered off. The second day we got back up to those bags that we had put on the wall, and we went up about another 1,000 feet. So now we're like really committed. And then we brought all of our equipment up, and then we do the same thing and we did that for 3 days. So basically
Wow.
2 nights sleeping on the wall and 1 night sleeping on top.
So you slept on the wall.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah. And
Wow.
it's pretty easy. Like the first day, there's this ledge that's probably as wide as like a dining room table and probably like 30 feet long. So we all just kind of sat up on the ledge and like slept for the night.
What
And that was
about going
pretty
to the
easy.
bathroom?
Oh yeah, that's always the question.
I gotta know.
There's a system. You just do it on the wall. You just use a system
What
of
about the
bags.
people? Yeah,
Well, oh
bags.
yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. You bring it
Privacy.
with you. There's no privacy.
You're just like look at the sky that way.
Exactly. Just ignore the tourists with the binoculars watching you. But yeah,
That's awesome.
you use like it's like a system of bags basically, and then you tow up all of your human waste like underneath your food and stuff like that. So like,
Wow.
yeah, it's a system. And actually, I was so nervous about that. I was like, man, I'm gonna have to like use the restroom up here. I don't know how it's gonna work.
But now
And
you're a
then,
pro.
well, yeah, now it's not a big
Once you,
deal.
yeah.
Yeah,
Once you do it, that's
yeah,
awesome.
it's not a big deal.
And then what about like your favorite place to travel and see?
Oh, and my favorite place that I've ever been, and I've only been once, was to Spain. And I went
Wow.
to Barcelona in, I think it was probably the winter of 2018. And I was there on like a climbing trip, but I also spent a little bit of time just by myself, like in Barcelona. And that is, I think, the most beautiful place I've ever been. Just with like the architecture and the whole city. I couldn't imagine living there. Like it just seems like it's such this like tourist destination, and so like cool that I couldn't imagine that being like everyone's day-to-day place that they
Right.
live. But the mountains around I actually then got a rental car and drove a couple hours south of Barcelona, and it was just amazing. It's really cool. I would say, yeah, that has been my favorite place that I've ever been.
Wow. That's so cool. So you have an amazing blog, and I've checked it out a couple times. So can you share with everybody about your blog?
Yeah, so this again was looking for that community before surgery and stuff like that. So I started posting kind of like my experience, and it's a blog spot or a blogger. So it's my aortic adventure at blogspot.com. And basically just kind of recapping some of the big questions that I had. What is INR? What is recovery looking like after surgery, and those type of things. So yeah, and it's something that I kind of just do because I do remember all of those questions that I had, and there weren't great answers from people who had been through the surgery. So it's kind of my way to just like share out that experience.
Which is amazing because, our doctors are great and amazing and everything, but they don't know firsthand, what the patients necessarily go through. They just know how to keep them stable and healthy and do their part. So it's so important having that patient aspect. And I think that's amazing that you're able to share that. So what is to come for 2021 for you this year? Any plans or cool trips
I don't know
or
yet.
goals?
Yeah, I'm dealing with like a pandemic planning style.
Yeah.
Usually I'll have my entire next year planned out, at least like, so for example, I was supposed to go to Europe this summer, and I was
Oh,
going to I had a one-way ticket to Europe, and I was like, I'll see what happens. I'm just going to go there, rock climb as
wow.
much as possible, hang out in Spain again, and on this little island called Mallorca off of Spain. And I had all this planned out, and then, that got shut down. So right now I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing over the next year. The big thing I want to do is I want to go back and climb more on El Cap. I want to go back to Yosemite and spend as much time as I can there. And I'm actually thinking about and working toward right now taking off a little bit of time and just kind of going and rock climbing as much as possible, and
Yeah.
kind of getting good at that. So the places I really love to go are to like British Columbia and climb there a lot. And I also love to go to Mexico and climb. So ideally,
Wow.
if those borders open, I can go back to those places at least.
Yes, this is the year of the road trips, I feel like.
Yeah, I actually built, I'm in the process of building a camper van. So I've been like, because
Wow.
I spend so much of my year like in climbing areas and sleeping, in a tent. Now I kind of have an easier way to do all of that, which is
That's
really cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I have a mom van, but I'm always like, man, I just want to, I can take my seats out and I'm like, I just want to put a mattress back there and just like drive somewhere.
Yeah.
That would be fun. And then to find you on Instagram, that is, it's aortic_adventure, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Awesome. And then of course I'm going to have all of the links and everything on bluedreamhealth.com. So anyone who's listening will have links to this episode. So if you want to check out the blog and all that good stuff. So any last minute things you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having me on and letting me share everything. And yeah, it's
Awesome.
been great
Thank
talking
you.
to you. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks. Please be sure that you subscribe to the blog, which is bluedreamhealth.com, where you can find additional links and information on this episode. You can also check out the digital magazine on our website, as well as find us on Patreon, where you can be a supporter.